This is an RNZ podcast.
As the Iran war sends fuel affordability in New Zealand up in smoke, the government's looking at the possibility of rationing. While hope is not a plan, the crisis has forced practical updates to the 2024 strategy that had been gathering dust, and ministers have needed to play a careful game in managing public expectations.
I will reiterate that we currently have healthy stocks.
7 weeks of petrol, more than 6 weeks of diesel and jet fuel.
None of the fuel companies have given us any cause for worry.
No cause for concern about fuel supplies in the short term.
The opposition wants more support for the worst off, but Labour's leaving it up to the government to figure out how.
I'm not going to make up policy on the fly. We're not the government.
With knife-edge polling piling pressure on ahead of the election, parties will be positioning carefully to show they can perform in a crisis. Kia ora, ko Russell Palmer aho. Ānei te pūrongo tō rangapū mō tēnei wiki. Welcome to Focus on Politics. The National Fuel Plan lays out how New Zealand would handle major disruptions to fuel supply. But its COVID alert level style framework has until now been relatively vague and theoretical. It promises, for example, to invoke critical customer prioritisation measures when the impact is at Phase 2, or moderate, and has 4 of these phases.
If we were to reach a response phase 3 or 4, then the potential disruption to New Zealanders and industry could be significant.
The Finance Minister, Nicola Willis, on Thursday, making clear it's a just-in-case plan.
Our goal is to avoid ever getting to response phase 3 or 4. These are envisaged in the National Fuel Plan as the point at which prioritisation of fuel would be required. Our goal is to be doing enough to source the supply of fuel internationally, that does not become necessary.
On Friday, she fills in a few more blanks. Each kind of fuel, diesel, petrol and aviation, will have its own alert level. New Zealand is currently at the lowest, Phase 1, for all 3 types.
Supplies remain normal, non-disrupted, and the government's role is to focus on monitoring fuel stock levels, to work closely with industry and international partners, to publish regular updates so New Zealanders have accurate, up-to-date information, and to advise on ways people can reduce their own fuel bills.
That advice, mostly common sense.
Checking tyre pressure, driving at steady speeds, reducing idling, lightening loads.
In Phase 2, fuel conservation is to be encouraged from commuters.
We might promote more use of public transport. We might promote carpooling, suggest that taking discretionary road trips wasn't the best idea.
From businesses,
restrict when truck movements can happen in CBD areas. Actually relax some of those regulations, noting that trucks might use less fuel if they were able to run their schedules differently.
And cutting consumption in the public sector.
School buses, hospital heating, but also to actively develop options for government agencies to minimise discretionary fuel use. This includes things such as Defence Force training.
The higher phases are still being consulted on, and the aim is to do everything possible to avoid them. But should they be necessary, Phase 3 would see the start of active prioritisation.
In such a way as to minimise disruption. It could also be necessary in this phase to introduce temporary purchase limits to help keep fuel available for everyone.
More detail too on who would be first in line.
1. Life-supporting services. This includes things such as emergency services, courts, prisons, hospitals, lifeline utilities and essential defence functions. 2. Economically important services, such as road freight for supermarket and grocery supply chains, international air links, food supply and primary production. 3. Essential services such as public transport, essential infrastructure maintenance, rural GPs, district nurses. 4. Other commercial users. And finally, general retail sales.
The government would achieve this with regulation to be implemented by industry. And in Phase 4,
the government would prioritise uninterrupted supply to life-preserving services, and we would more strictly direct how fuel is distributed to other customers.
Moving up or down alert levels is decided by a ministerial oversight group based on fuel stocks, restrictions and supply chain disruption. A change in any one of 6 criteria would prompt a 2-day assessment in consultation with industry on whether to shift. It's a careful balance the government's trying to strike between providing too little information and too much, between reassuring voters there's a plan in place and sparking panic buying. Laying out detailed plans for fuel rationing, for example, will have some nervously eyeing the fuel gauge and thinking about when best to fill up.
It is difficult to predict human behaviour, and it's part of the reason why we continue to assure people there is enough fuel, so you don't need to be stocking or hoarding fuel in order to be confident that you'll be able to keep accessing fuel over the next few weeks.
New Zealand gets about half its refined fuel from South Korea and another third from Singapore. While both have been planning for more shocks and exploring curbs on exports, Fuel Security Minister Shane Jones says we're not there yet.
It does take 18 days for a ship to come from South Korea, 16 days from Singapore. We are advised that there are ongoing problems with accessing feedstock, but none of the fuel companies have given us any cause for worry in terms of what Nicola has already said, what's in the country, what's in our sovereign waters, what's on international, and what they're confident they are contracting.
At Postcab on Monday, the Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, has a handle on those bilateral relationships.
So I'll be talking to Prime Minister Wong and President Lee to better understand any challenges that they may have with accessing crude oil for their refineries in the coming weeks. I've also been talking to Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, and we've agreed to work together as much as possible, and also we have encouraged our ministers to continue to talk to each other.
At the same briefing, Mr Jones details the first fruits of that partnership with plans to align New Zealand's fuel specifications with Australia's.
Simple example, if a vessel is coming, a long-range vessel which probably carries 120 million litres, I remind you we chew through 24 million litres a day, 47% of that, 45% is diesel, between a third and 35% is petrol, and the remainder is aviation fuel. Should such a vessel be on its way to Australia, then we would have the ability to also benefit.
He says the differences are not so much about quality as what burns best where.
It's unkind of us to refer to our Aussie compatriots as dirty. In many respects, some of the specs that exist in Australia are slightly higher than what we have in New Zealand. There has been the point made that some of the fuel destined for northern Queensland may not work in the frigid south.
Should the well run dry, New Zealand could also buy into international reserves.
The fuel is stored either in Japan, the United States, and I think the UK. There would need to be some internal trading because some areas do not have the capacity to immediately process crude unless it's from the right location. But we're getting that advice next week.
The Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment is tracking fuel supply, publishing updates every Monday and Wednesday. The Transport Minister, Chris Bishop, on Friday highlights some other data.
We're already seeing significant shifts in behaviour across the country, and as a government we are closely monitoring those changes so we can respond.
Kilometres travelled by car down 20% compared to mid-February. Public transport use up more than 10% in Auckland and Wellington, and EV registrations over 1,000 this week, more than double the last week and hitting peaks not seen since late 2023 when the clean car discount was being scrapped.
It was a regressive wealth transfer policy, and so we will not be bringing back the clean car discount. It also meant that taxpayers had to pay for that transition, and I do not think it is a prudent use of taxpayer money.
Fuel supply is, of course, only part of the problem. The Iran conflict has set international crude oil markets ablaze, feeding directly into prices at the pump. On Wednesday, a 28-day running average on fuel price monitoring app GasSpy showed a full $1 increase in the price of a litre of unleaded 91 over 28 days. Diesel up more than $1.50. It's levelled out a bit since, but motorists are feeling the pinch. Auckland Action Against Poverty's co-chair, Agnes Mangele, works with those down on their luck every day.
We had young ones coming in last week, and they're looking at, and I'm being real when I say this, they're looking at robbing the petrol station. That's the kind of effect that it has on the people on the ground.
So what can be done? Chris Bishop says in the long term, the increase in fuel taxes previously delayed by National to 2027 may be scrapped.
Petrol tax is due to go up by 12 cents per litre on the 1st of January next year, by another 6 cents on the 1st of January 28 and 4 cents in each year after that. Now, I have to be honest with you, the idea that we would raise fuel tax during a fuel crisis doesn't seem like a starter to me.
But no cuts in the meantime.
Throwing the kitchen sink at every event that happens is a recipe for fiscal disaster. So I understand the calls for broad across-the-board fuel tax cuts. Across-the-board fuel tax cuts are also extremely expensive and they're untargeted. So we've taken an approach based on advice and based on best practice of focusing support on those who need it most.
That support was announced on Tuesday. As expected, it's a boost to the Working for Families in Work tax credit.
From next month, 143,000 low to middle income working families with children will get an extra $50 a week in their bank accounts.
The cash bump brings the maximum payment for the tax credit to nearly $150. To be eligible, families with 3 kids need to be earning $135,000 or less, dropping to $89,000 for families with 1 child. Eligibility for reduced amounts is expanding to another 14,000 families. The policy is already costing up to $373 million, and Nicola Willis is warning anything more could impact the economy.
We got a pointed warning from the Fitch Rating Credit Agency on Friday that it is watching our government debt levels closely. Borrowing large sums of money to insulate New Zealanders from this conflict, a conflict that is not of our making, would increase debt and debt servicing costs and potentially lead to a credit rating downgrade. That would further push up borrowing costs for the government, for business and for households.
So the policy is destined for the fiscal cliff, time limited to a year, or earlier if prices drop below $3 a litre for 4 weeks in a row. Coalition partner ACT's David Seymour is particularly pleased with that.
I'm quite confident that we will find the several hundred million required for this, but I also hope that petrol price falls back, the hardness of the problem is diminished, and that we can actually stop this payment because people will be getting cheaper fuel.
New Zealand First's Winston Peters says the support's a serious start.
Look, it's going to possibly almost 400,000 now if you add in the children. Come on, do the calculations. Husband and wife, mum and dad and all the kids. It could be up there, that many, but of course we'd like to do more. But in the meantime, we've got a budget to prepare, and so that's all we can say now.
It's certainly welcome news for those who qualify, but childless workers, beneficiaries and superannuitants are among those who don't. The opposition says more support is needed.
The next steps is, what is the government going to do next for those groups?
It's completely failed to meet the crisis and is leaving far, far too many New Zealanders behind.
We've got 140,000 that have been accommodated for, but there's at least 620,000 that haven't been.
Beneficiaries are particularly exposed. The Social Development Minister acknowledged many of those families will miss out.
48% of children in material hardship are in working households.
That immediately discounts at least half the children doing it the toughest and their parents. Louise Upston is expecting more urgent requests for help.
So there is already assistance available for costs for those on a job seeker benefit to get to an interview if they need it. But if you look at this fuel price pressure, it will have an impact on a range of households. So yes, I expect that there will be more seeking assistance.
The Finance Minister says beneficiaries are already in line for a boost.
We will be increasing main benefit rates on the 1st of April, so a couple with children receiving job seeker support receive an increase of more than $20 a week.
But the Greens' Mercado Menendez-March says fuel grants and the April 1st increase, which is required by law and tagged to inflation, are simply not enough.
Advances for fuel come as a debt. So she's basically asking our poorest to enter into debt to be able to afford their basic essentials, including fuel. And the other assistance that exists in the form of the transition to work grant is quite limited, and most people don't get to access it. And it only covers things like job appointments, not necessarily picking up kids from school or doctor's appointments as well. The minister has, in the answers to my question, pointed out to the indexation of benefits to CPI, but this is automatic, legally required, and it's far less than $50. It's disingenuous for her to point out to that figure when that was going to happen anyway, fuel crisis or otherwise, and it does not meet the challenges that poor people face.
The Greens last weekend offered support to National on a series of interventions to help with the crisis. The response? Thanks but no thanks. But at least the offer was there. Labour's Chris Hipkins is not interested in doing the same.
I'm not going to get into the territory of putting out wish lists of things unless I know how much they're going to cost, unless I know how we'll be able to deliver.
He's adamant the party does not have the data and information available to the government and is refusing to propose ideas until closer to the election. Agnes Mangele is among those saying that's not good enough.
They need to step up a little bit more. I think that they've been a little bit weak and not pushing back.
As for the government, the plan is now clearer, and they're spending less than might have been expected under Labour. But it remains to be seen how that fiscal rectitude will be received, and whether, come budget time, more support or interventions might be required. That was Focus on Politics. Make sure to follow us on your favourite podcast app, or seek out RNZ's new Politics NZ podcast feed and subscribe there. I'm Russell Palmer, thanks for joining us. Mā te wā.